right, welcome here to Egyptian civilization. We're now kind of going to move around for the next few weeks and travel around the world. Now that we've established what a civilization is and looked at that, and particularly in the Mesopotamian world, now we're going to look at other places where civilizations have emerged. And the thing about civilizations is they're all kind of similar. There's a lot of similarities between them, but each one's a little unique as well. So as we're kind of going through this, we can sort of start our first historical, our first method of historical thinking by comparing and contrasting. What is similar with various civilizations, but then how are they different? How are they unique to themselves? And we can see this particularly with Egypt and Mesopotamia. As we go through this, we'll look at some of the similarities and differences of these two early societies and civilizations. In this lecture, we're going to look at sort of the founding of Egyptian civilization. Then we'll look at the Egyptian society. We'll look at Egyptian kingdoms, later on Egyptian religion, and then we'll look at some neighbors of Egypt, Nubia and sub-Saharan Africa a little bit later. But here, I like this picture here because this is a nice kind of what Egypt looks like today. I mean, everyone knows the pyramids are they're the epitome of early Egyptian civilization. But here, if you're in Cairo, right, the pyramids are right there. Right? They're not in the middle of nowhere. They're actually right in the city of the capital of Egypt today. So Egypt, that civilization is still very much part of the contemporary world. So just a little bit about Egypt, just kind of lay a little bit of geography, kind of get to where it is, features of this civilization, and again, similar to Mesopotamia, rivers. Rivers are important. In Mesopotamia, you have two rivers, Tigris and Euphrates. In Egypt, there's one river, the Nile River, the longest river in the world. Starts up here in these sort of Great Lakes regions of Eastern Africa, Lake Victoria. A lot of sort of highland rainforests, and then it rolls down through here. It leaks in with the Blue Nile, Karakoram, and then down here, flowing always north. This is sort of how the Nile goes. You can see the Nile River. Here's Cairo. This is where the pyramids are. Luxor. This is the major temple site. So really, this river, all of the peoples that inhabited this region, all these regions connected and could move between north and south, sub-Saharan Africa, the Mediterranean, via the Nile River. So we have the major component of all early civilizations are rivers. Nile is the one of Egypt, of Egypt and Africa. One other thing here that there's sort of that the Nile River is divided by these things called cataracts or areas of rapids. The first main one is Aswan, and then so sort of there's a geographical topographical distinction between what is sort of I believe this is the lower Nile and the upper Nile, and this is sort of the traditional difference between what is Egyptian civilization and Nubian civilization. So these kind of because a lot of people you could traverse the river pretty cleanly up until this cataract, and then you had to get out and then move up. So it got a little harder to move up the water here. You can kind of see these cataracts. Today, this one is now a dam. They built a big hydroelectric dam here, so it no longer exists. So what is Nubia what is Egypt and how did it come about? Here is a very good picture of the Nile River, this little ribbon of green in Africa. So all of this is surrounded by desert. It didn't always used to be like that. Then the Saharan Desert, I mean, a long time ago, it used to be a whole ocean to itself. And then gradually over time, about 8,000 BC, with part of this sort of ice age, different weather or climate changes that were going on, the Sahara Desert got more desertification. And as it did, more people started to move out of the desert and settle along the river, the Nile River here. And you can see this ribbon of green, and then the big, very, very fertile Nile Delta. Here's another good picture of this, this where it's the green, verdant, productive land, and then right there, the stark contrast to the desert. So about 5,000 BC, people were starting to settle, and then about 3,000 BC, you get the first vestiges of Egyptian society. The way the Nile worked a little bit different. This is another compare and contrast with other parts, particularly Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia relied on a lot of irrigation, managing of their water resources because they had two rivers that could oscillate between, droughts and dry periods. The Nile River was very, very predictable, and every year it would flood. There'd be from the rains in the interland of Africa. Just south of this is a big rainforest. So it would rain, and then this Nile River would flood, and it would bring all these sediments with it. And this would rejuvenate all of this farmland. So you really didn't have to do much irrigation. You would farm, you would harvest, and then you would wait. Once the harvest was done, right? You would wait. The floods would come. Everyone would move out, and then when the floodwaters recede, then you could plant again. So this actual seasons of Africa are very much related, or Egypt are very much related to how their cultures work. There's different festival seasons. There's different labor seasons. Once you've harvested, you just you don't have to really do much. You don't have to repair a bunch of things or build irrigation dams. You just kind of wait, and then when the floods go down during the flood time, everyone has food, and you can do other things like build pyramids and various stuff as well. So the Nile was very, very productive. I mean, it always continually regenerated the soil. Another thing about the Nile is that it flowed from the south to the north. So boats could go very easily down the Nile. But the nice thing about it is the prevailing winds blew up the Nile. So all the winds blow up. So you can see all these boats here. So it was very easy to navigate. You could move back and forth along the Nile very easily. So again, we talked about when we talked about Mesopotamia, all of the roles of the river, particularly in trade. Well, here, you could move products, people's ideas, big, huge sandstone blocks up and down these rivers with relative ease. Here's another good example of the Nile here, with people even today using the winds and the currents to their advantage. So here, just kind of give you an idea, a visual of the Nile River, of what these early Egyptian societies lived and thrived in. And then just kind of Egypt here. For the rest of this second part of this lecture, we're going to look mainly at Egypt. But Egypt was never disconnected from its neighbors. I mean, there was always contact between, particularly Egypt and Nubia. Nubia we'll look at a little bit later. This is Aswan, the major cataract here. So we'll look at Nubia there. And Nubia is important because everything sub-Saharan Africa came up to Nubia. So all of the trade, things that were going on, we'll look at that a little bit later, passed through the Nubian Empire, then passed through Egypt, and then passed to the Mediterranean. And likewise, backwards as well, things from Mesopotamia, Levant, Anatolia, Greece, passed from Egypt through Nubia. So Nubia was a very important part, a neighboring of the Egyptian world. The Levant, as we sort of talked about, this would be the Hebrews were, but also the Phoenicians. So again, they were also at some points part of, at the height, this extension of Egyptian civilization were sort of subservient to Egypt, but in other times Egypt would contract, or maybe the Assyrians and Mesopotamians would come in, and other times they're independent. But definitely connections there as well. And then obviously Mesopotamia, just to give you a geography. Here's the two rivers. Here's Nineveh, Babylon. There's a big, huge desert here, so a lot of people moved up these rivers across the Mediterranean Sea to move back and forth. Although the Red Sea was also very important to trade, you could move down here up around the Arabian Peninsula. Babylonian, Assyrian, which we talked about previously. The Hittites were up here. We'll encounter them a little bit too in the context of Egyptian history. So they're still around within this larger world of Egypt. But that kind of gives us sort of a lay of the land of these early civilizations. And there are obvious connections, as we saw, trade connections between them, between all of these different groups as well.